Teaching myself Unreal Engine 5 until I'm good enough to get a job, day 1. Today, I realized I don't want to be the middleman in a sales channel for the rest of my life, so I'm beginning to teach myself Unreal Engine in the hopes that one day I can support myself with something I'm actually passionate about. I have zero formal education in coding or game design, so I found a recommended course on Udemy from this dude named Steve. Udemy will give you a discount if you create a new account, so it seemed like a cheap, good idea. My goal is to work through it at least 1 hour a day every day before work until I'm good enough to support myself. For day 1, I installed Unreal, learned about different view modes, how to manipulate objects, and some basic panel functions. Day 2. Today, I started section 2 of Steve's course on Udemy of learning Unreal Engine. It went over all the free stuff available on Quixel Bridge. I also learned that my PC can't handle too large an open world. I found out how to create 2 suns like in Star Wars and paint a landscape, which is way harder than it seems, even with free assets. And after finishing the lecture, I'm not the only one struggling. Mr. Steve has made another hour-long lecture solely on fixing the tiling. Looks like I know what I'm doing for my day 3. Day 3. After making a pretty gross-looking level, I stumbled upon an hour-long lecture going over the final details of tile blending within Unreal Engine 5. It's not something I'm super focused on. I want to learn to code, but I would like my portfolio to look as professional as possible. So here I go, learning again. And what I've learned is that there's several ways to combat bad tiling. Alternating texture coordinates to make your texture look larger, changing color variations within the tiling, and also changing pixel depth. And I'm also realizing that it's taking around 2 hours of work to cover 1 hour of lecturing. So it looks like I can hope to finish this course in 4 months instead of 2. Day 4. I spent all of yesterday making new, sexier tile sets, but then went back to my older map to paint foliage, which just turns out is super easy to do.
You can find amazing assets for free on the Unreal Engine Marketplace, import them into your world, add them as a type of foliage, and generate geometry for them with no coding at all.
From there, you can even alter the foliage to make it shake in the wind. Just don't do this with hundreds of large trees, or else you'll crash your PC, like I did. Day 5. I've decided to start again from scratch, as it feels I've been drinking from a fire hose when it comes to all the more in-depth stuff covered in yesterday's lecture. My plan is to scale down my level, and to make simply a starting area that branches off into 3 other distinct levels. This will let me play around with things on a smaller scale, so I'll have more control and hopefully stop future crashes. Day 6. With my new starting area complete, I'm moving on to learning about post-processing. I already kind of know a bit how this should act from my prior experience with Photoshop and Premiere, but basically you can create spaces or post-process volumes where you can alter the RGB values of effects. This can create localized areas with certain distinct features, like making one zone of your map at night, and then when you leave, turn it to day. Day 7. Today we are working with more assets from Quixel Bridge. It's incredible how good everything looks here and how bad my world looks in comparison. It would literally be better if I used assets from Quixel Bridge instead of creating my own landscapes. I'm going to put this huge rock on top of my entrance instead of trying to make some sort of tunnel. And then I'm going to use those rocks on a much larger scale to create a series of peaks and valleys. All in all, I really don't like working with the landscape, but I've finished my 3 zones.
Day 8. Today we are focusing on packed level actors and basically learning how to jack assets from the marketplace. I also realized that rocks don't have collision turned on by default, so I'll have to go in and do it myself. I figured out you can add collision by generating blockage. I'm thinking a bit more about the overall design of my level, and in the end, I think I want to make like a roguelike with third-person combat, since third-person combat is what we're learning in this course, and roguelike games are replayable games that people can normally pick up and play. And when I show this to people, I'd like them to be able to play it on the first try. Day 9. Today I spent 2 hours working on one problem. See, my problem was my map looked fine. I popped in this level from the Unreal Marketplace, got it lined up with my world, cleaned up the entrance, it looked great. Well, it looked shitty, but I got it working. Then I went to test it, and my character shot up into the air. Now comes the true downside of self-teaching and remote learning. I had no one to ask about this oddly specific problem. You can ask ChatGPT, but it has no fucking clue how anything works. It just Googles it and then summarizes the answers. So you say,
"Fine. I'll do it myself."
And just realize that it is incredibly hard to research a problem because it is incredibly hard to describe that problem without using technical terms you might not be familiar with. It's maddening, but this course luckily has a Discord, and Reddit has jerks who happen to be very smart. And I soon realized that my skybox collision was turned on for some reason, so I turned it off and I could play. 10. Today it becomes sink or swim, and we are finally getting into coding. Steven Sensei makes a face reveal. Basically, this is just an hour of lectures on vectors and understanding that vectors might have different coordinates but are mathematically the same, and how you can reverse a vector by making it negative, add and subtract vectors. Then it moved on how to do all of those things but with 3D vectors. I assume it's important that two different vectors with different coordinates can realistically be thought as the same vector, because computer memory is all about saving something once and then creating a pointer with 1/100th the data size to call over and over again in order to save space. And also, learning to represent coordinates as a vector is very helpful, and it makes sense out of a lot of the details on the details panel. Day 11. Today we are doing something I've already done countless times, setting up an IDE. Whether it was CS50, modding games, or past attempts at self-taught courses, I've set these things up so many times. But this time I'm not going to select every type of coding available and then get completely overwhelmed. I'm going to stick with .NET, C++ Dev, and Game Dev. This will be my first time using IntelliSense 2, so I'm excited to see how that works. The course mentioned Rider for Unreal and Whole Tomato as upgrades to the IntelliSense. Honestly though, I kind of want to buy them because it sounds like they make coding way easier, at least according to Reddit, but for the time being, I'm just going to raw dog it on the settings Mr. Steve suggests. 12. Today was nothing but coding, which is helpful because I'm familiar with C from CS50, but oh boy am I not familiar with C++. From my understanding in the video, the core difference is that C++ has inheritance between its various classes. My guess is that this will be helpful to make sweeping changes to multiple characters at a time, like being able to interact with an item, but then changing the effect that item might have. The course asked us to make an example of these concepts as a demonstration, and since YouTube has become my rubber duck debugger, I'll do my best to explain it to you using Elden Ring characters. Classes can have parents and children. Parents have a pointer, functions, and variables that it passes down through a linked list. Children can have their own children, and they can even have functions that override their functions passed down to them through their parent class. You can also call the functions of child classes through a parent class by using a cast. Day 13. Today is more coding, and I finally understand how my code interacts with Unreal Engine and game engines in general. For this lesson, we basically learned how to create an actor class that prints a message, which should be incredibly useful. Professor Steven broke down all the awesome stuff that UE5 does for you, so if you suck at coding, you don't have to remember to put basic headers or tick functions that are built into Unreal to keep track of what is interacting with an actor at any given moment. The reason I'm highlighting this is that the function affects performance, so I imagine anytime someone is optimizing an Unreal game, they're just scrolling through thousands of lines of code and setting a tick to false. Of course, after creating my item class, I can't find it in Unreal, so I need to pause my progress and participate in the best part of self-teaching, reading horrible Microsoft forums. I don't know what is going on, but I know that I get a bunch of red X's on my compatibility test, so I'm going to get those sorted and pray to any god that will listen it shows up. Day 14. Today we learned about blueprints, and I got to say, I love them. When I took CS50, they had this thing called Scratch that I absolutely love to use. And boy am I psyched that there is basically coding in Unreal with a similar block method. Yes, I know it is not the same, but damn do I like it. And it makes it feel more understandable after getting beat down by the IDE yesterday. The next lesson focuses on using debug lines and spheres, and I can get all the blueprints to work, but working on the code itself is much more tedious. It's almost painful to see how much it takes to make a sphere in C++ instead of in Blueprint. I'm sure there is a good reason to use raw code over blueprints, but goddamn are they helpful.
Day 15. Today, I'm working on a challenge. See, we spent the last few days learning how to draw debug lines, points, and spheres. Now we are tasked with creating a debug object. The thing that instantly jumps to mind is a debug box. But since I'm bad at coding, I'm probably going to start with the square. If I look into the debug helpers file, I can see that there is actually already a debug helper for both these things, which I'm not going to lie, takes a lot of wind out of my sails. However, something I'm running into is that Unreal recommends 32 gigs of RAM, and my 16 is not cutting the mustard. Every time I change a line, I have to hot reload it, and it takes like 10 to 15 minutes. And then I do 4 iterations of that, and it ends up not working. I know my clear problem is with this forward piece. My current understanding of what a vector forward is the direction of the vector. But the second I add a third axis, my eyes get crossed. This is gonna take another day. Day 16. Today, I'm working on a challenge that I failed yesterday, the drawing of a debug box from scratch. So I decided to go back and watch the lecture about 3D vectors with the context of drawing a box, and I've since realized that I need to find out where the first 2 vectors' points of intersection are and go from there. I can do some freaky math shit to make it a square, but I literally do not know how to find
find 2 points of a 3D vector. So here I go, learning again. And what I've learned is that I'm simply not smart enough to do it. I really think my inability has less to do with the overall potential of me to do it,
I can't. I simply can't.
but rather just the complete lack of understanding to accomplish it. If I had a teacher, I'm sure they could explain it to me easily, but I don't, so I'm going to take the L and come back to it when I have a better understanding of how Unreal handles 3D vectors. I do not want to spend 5 days brute forcing a solution to an artificial problem. When I've done that in the past with self-teaching, I just spin out and never pick it up.
Day 17. After taking an L and giving up on last section's challenge, I'm happy to get some lecturing by the sensei. And this time, it's on a very sexy topic. Moving things with numbers. I feel like this lesson should help me conceptualize how things are moving into 3D space through code, and what I've learned is that pretty much our entire understanding of math comes from the right angle. The amount of logics and proofs this dude just threw at me to explain why the sine function graphs like a wave is absurd, but it looks like that is the key to getting things to move on their own in a pattern. So things like a platform moving back and forth in a video game or up and down. Tomorrow, we take that learning and apply it to those stupid debug circles.
Day 18. Okay, the name of today's game is Moving Things with Code. Basically the first real programming I'll ever do. The building block that all game devs tell you to start with. 18 days in of learning and I'm here. And as it turns out, it's pretty easy. The blueprint demonstration made a lot of sense and I'm just getting better at making sure my code doesn't have stupid errors and misspellings like missing semicolons. This is incredibly helpful for me because every time it hot loads, my computer hisses and moans like a dying animal. Day 19. Okay, I got some more RAM, and despite everyone telling me online I shouldn't use 48 gigs, I'm going to because I'm broke. Oh, look at that. Everything crashed for no real reason. Cue spending hours to download new graphics drivers, cleaning my PC, reformatting my PC. What ended up being the problem was that when I was resetting the PC with the RAM, I must have accidentally checked XMP. I don't even know what that is. It turns out XMP is a program that's designed to make your RAM go faster, but if you turn it on, it actually kills any program with a memory leak. This includes things like incredibly buggy code with Unreal, and yet it's honestly very inspirational to see that someone on a professional level has released an incredibly buggy piece of code that has caused my PC not to run. I feel like a real pro. Day 20. Today was not a very sexy day of learning. I spent hours futzing with variables, learning how to add them to classes, expose them to Blueprint, and change them with the details panel. I just wish I had something cooler to show for it now that my PC is working as expected, but that is a win in and of itself, and my hot reloading times are so much faster now. Day 21. On day 15 and 16, I had my ass handed to me by a challenge of drawing a two-dimensional shape, and I blamed my lack of success on my lack of understanding of geometry. Today I did it. I drew a damn debug square, and it took a lot more looking up than I would have liked, but it feels good to get this challenge done. Just don't ask me how to build a debug box. Day 22. Today I learned about components within Unreal. It would seem that this is where the real meat of programming will come from in regards to things like clip checks, aka interactions between various actors, which is basically all of gaming, but it also holds important information for every item/class. So I would say it's pretty goddamn important. I have to imagine this is where the fun begins. We also went over pivot points, which I'm guessing is how animators use Unreal to make things move. Day 23. For this section's challenge, we are tasked with building a component of our own creation. I just want to build a block man. A man with a chest, arms, legs, head, and no real neck. Honestly, I think I did a great job. Next thing on the list should be making him move. Day 24. Today we learned all about skeletal meshes and capsules within Unreal. Capsules are basically collision boxes you can tie events to. You do this because whatever model you are using is too taxing to use its polygons as hitboxes, at least 9 out of 10 times. So a close enough collision box is good. We also learned about skeletal systems. I never would have guessed that every model in Unreal has a legit ass skeleton inside it, but damn, even the free assets on this are basically fun medical models. Day 25. Today we start our next task of making a playable bird, something with animation in its wings that we can fly around the map using a controller. My guess is that we take the movement and give it to our player character later, but for now I'm creating a bird class in C++, creating a bird in Blueprint in Unreal, hitting up Quixel Bridge, which I found out is going to be closing, and that makes me sad. It's amazing how tech I just learned about can become obsolete in 25 days. I hope this new fab thing is better, but for now it's new, different, and I hate it. Day 26. Keeping up with Day 25's theme of previously awesome tech becoming useless, it turns out that Unreal has made an enhanced input system in place of their older system that this course covers. So the professor basically just hit me with a surprise hour lecture, followed by several smaller surprise lectures. The cool part is that you can actually find all these lectures on the Druix Mechanic YouTube itself. Please go check it out. It's where all this is coming from. But the long and short of it is that basically you can use Epic's real handy movement system, or you can code it yourself, which is way, way harder. Either way, it's probably good to learn to map C++ functions to buttons. Day 27. Today was another plain day. No heat, no big sexy visuals. Just adding a basic flying animation to my crow. But then I got hit with an error MSB3073 exited with code 6. If anyone knows what that is or what that means, please tell me in the comments. But for now, I have to use this Reddit thread for a fix. The top fix is clear your intermediate folder, clear your saved folder, clear your binaries folder, regenerate project files by right-clicking the .u project file, and rebuild. And it turns out I had to delete the intermediate folder with the command prompt, but God bless Reddit fixes like this, because everything loads nicely now. Time to spend the next hours animating this guy's wings. JK, you pretty much just click and drag. God bless marketplace assets. Day 28. Yesterday I got a crow's wings flapping and binded some C++ functions to button presses. Now we're going to talk about movement, which begins by creating an input within Unreal, assigning it a button, and then assigning that button a value. For example, you can map that button to change one element of a 3D vector. So like when you press the W key on your keyboard, this is a graph of what it looks like. This is one with D pressed, and this is one with W and D pressed. Using a combination of these techniques, you're pretty much able to move a character wherever you need it to in a 3D space. Day 29. After going through 2-hour-long lectures on movement, I'm still very confused on how movement works, and more importantly, how to get it all going in C++ instead of Blueprint. The key thing I've learned is the importance of .build.cs, which isn't even written in C++, it's written in C#, like some kind of song. You need to add files into the list of the build file to get access to those functions contained within those systems, like the enhanced movement files. But now I'm getting errors from files I haven't even touched. Great. Day 30. After adding my enhanced input system to the projects.build file, I've broken everything. But this time, I've broken things that I haven't even opened or touched. I do not understand what the real problem is, so here I go, learning again. And what I've learned is that really no one knows the cause of this problem. However, it seems deleting the game's files and rebuilding solves them. So it looks like I'm gonna have to do that pretty much every time I want to make an update to my project. Hooray. Day 31. Today marks a month of learning Unreal, and I gotta say, I'm kinda saddened by how little I've learned. I've watched a lot, and I have learned some things, but if you ask me to repeat any of the things I've learned in coding from scratch, I would not really be able to do it. But I'm also not going to neglect the progress of a baby step. And I finally got access to the enhanced movement functions in C++ through my .build file, and I've restarted my project yet again, so hopefully I won't need to rebuild it every single time. The repetition caused by fixing my own mistakes is actually forcing me to learn things, and for that, I'm grateful.